The Last Hunt of Mosi. In the heart of the African savanna, under the golden hues of a setting sun, there lived a young African wolf named Mosi. He had always been different from the other wolves in his pack. Mosi's coat was darker, almost a shadow against the vast landscape, with eyes that gleamed with a quiet wisdom beyond his years. He had grown up under the watchful eyes of his father, the pack leader, who had taught him the ways of survival in the unforgiving wilderness. Mosi's pack roamed the open plains of the Serengeti, where food was scarce and danger was ever present. Lions roamed the edges of their territory, hyenas were always lurking, and the changing seasons made it harder to find prey. Mosi's father, Kazi, was known for his strength and leadership. But as Mosi grew, it became clear that he had a different way of thinking. While his father relied on brute strength and aggressive tactics, Mosi believed in strategy, patience, and using the environment to his advantage. One evening, as the pack gathered around a campfire, Kazi spoke of a recent encounter with a lion pride that had strayed too close to their territory. "We are warriors," he said, "and we fight to protect what's ours." The other wolves howled in agreement, but Mosi remained silent. He respected his father, but he had come to realize that survival often required more than just fighting. It was about understanding the land and the creatures that shared it with them. As the days passed, the pack faced greater challenges. The herds of wildebeest, their primary source of food, were migrating to the north, where the rains had brought lush grass. The pack had to follow, but the journey was long, and food was scarce along the way. Mosi, ever observant, noticed the smaller animals. The gazelles, the jackals, had learned to live in the shadow of the larger predators. They avoided the lions by staying in the tall grasses, moving quietly, and using the wind to hide their scent. One day, as the pack neared the edge of the river, Mosi spotted a lone gazelle drinking from the water. It was vulnerable, unaware of the approaching pack. Kazi, eager to lead the charge, began to creep forward, but Mosi halted him. "Let me try something different," he said, his voice calm and steady. Kazi frowned, but allowed Mosi to take the lead. Mosi moved silently through the tall grass, his paws barely making a sound as he circled the gazelle from behind. He used the wind to his advantage, ensuring the scent was carried away from the prey. As he got closer, he waited for the perfect moment. The gazelle drank deeply, unaware of the approaching danger. In one swift motion, Mosi pounced. His body moved with precision, taking down the gazelle in a way that was both efficient and quick. The pack watched in awe as Mosi's plan unfolded flawlessly. They had never seen such a tactic before. Kazi approached, his face unreadable. "You took a risk, Mosi," he said. "But it worked." The older wolf's voice was thick with pride, though he hid it well. Mosi knew his father had seen the value in his strategy. From that day forward, Mosi became more than just the son of the pack leader. He was a strategist, a thinker who could read the land and understand the creatures that roamed it. His success brought a new way of thinking to the pack. They learned to wait, to watch, and to use the environment to their advantage rather than relying solely on strength. But Mosi's most significant challenge came when the rains stopped and the herds began to thin. With less food to be found, the pack began to grow restless. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, and desperation took hold. One night, under the moonlight, a lone lion appeared at the edge of their territory, its yellow eyes glowing in the dark. It was the same lion that had come too close to their pack months earlier. The pack bristled, ready for a fight. But Mosi, seeing the desperation in his father's eyes, knew that this battle was different. He could sense that the lion was not alone. It had been stalking them, waiting for an opportunity. The young wolf took a deep breath and knew what he had to do. "We cannot fight this battle head-on," Mosi said, his voice steady. "We must outsmart it, just like we did before." Kazi hesitated but trusted his son. "What do you suggest?" he asked. Mosi led the pack into the dense underbrush, where they could move unseen. The lion had no idea they were closing in. Using the same strategy as before, Mosi relied on the wind to mask their scent. As they neared the lion's position, Mosi could hear its heavy breathing. The pack was tense, every muscle coiled, ready to strike. But Mosi held them back, waiting for the right moment. When the lion moved closer to a small grove of trees, Mosi signaled. The pack darted out, creating confusion, forcing the lion into a trap. They surrounded it, but instead of attacking, they used their numbers to herd it away, driving it into a dense thicket where it could do no more harm. It was a dangerous gamble, but Mosi's strategy had worked once again. The lion, disoriented and outnumbered, fled into the night. The pack celebrated, but Mosi remained quiet. His mind already focused on the next challenge. He knew that survival in the African savanna was never guaranteed, and every day brought a new test. But for now, his pack had learned that strength alone wasn't enough. It took patience, intelligence, and understanding the land they called home. As Mosi stood on the edge of the plains, watching the stars emerge one by one, he knew that the true mark of a leader wasn't how many battles were won, but how well one could guide their pack through the storms of life. And so, the last hunt of Mosi became a legend, passed down through the generations of wolves that would come after him. It was a tale of wit, of patience, and of the wisdom that came with understanding not just the land, but the heart of every creature that roamed it. Months passed, and the seasons began to shift once more across the Serengeti. The rains returned, and the grasslands flourished once again, providing sustenance to the many creatures that called this vast savanna home. The wildebeest returned, bringing with them an abundance of prey, but the true test for Mosi's pack was yet to come. With each passing day, Mosi's reputation as a wise leader spread among the wolves. His ability to read the land, to understand the movements of prey and predators, made him not just a respected figure within his pack, but a symbol of what could be achieved with more than just brute force. His father, Kazi, had aged, and the responsibility of leading the pack was beginning to weigh heavily on him. One evening, as the sun began to dip beneath the horizon, Kazi called Mosi to his side. The old wolf's fur had grayed, and his once commanding posture had softened. His eyes, however, still held the same fire they had in his youth. "Mosi," Kazi began, his voice heavy with both pride and weariness. "It is time." Mosi's heart skipped a beat. He knew what his father meant. It was time for Kazi to step down, to pass on the mantle of leadership. The young wolf had always known this moment would come, but now that it was here, a wave of uncertainty washed over him. He wasn't sure if he was ready. "I've watched you grow, my son. You've become everything I hoped you would be," Kazi continued, his voice thick with emotion. "But leadership is more than just making decisions. It's about carrying the weight of the pack, protecting them, guiding them through the hardships they will face. And I know you will do this better than I ever could." Mosi looked at his father, feeling the full weight of the moment. He had always known that leadership wasn't about power, but now it was real. His father's legacy, the strength of the pack, all rested on his shoulders. The thought was overwhelming, yet something deep within Mosi stirred, a sense of resolve. He had faced many challenges, and each time he had emerged victorious. This would be no different. "I won't let you down, father," Mosi replied, his voice firm with determination. Kazi nodded slowly, the pride in his eyes unmistakable. "I know you won't." With the passing of the torch, Mosi officially became the leader of the pack. The transition was not without its challenges. Some of the older wolves, including his own kin, were reluctant to accept the change. They had known Kazi as their leader for years and were unsure if Mosi's methods could replace the tried-and-true strength of his father's leadership. But Mosi remained patient, understanding that leadership wasn't about forcing others to follow, it was about earning their trust and respect. As the new leader, Mosi took the pack on a series of hunts, each one different from the last. He taught them how to use the landscape to their advantage, how to move silently through the savannah, and how to wait for the perfect moment to strike. He encouraged his pack to think strategically, to approach every hunt not as a battle of might, but as a test of intellect. But it wasn't long before the true test of Mosi's leadership came. A drought struck the Serengeti, causing the riverbeds to dry up and the grasslands to wither. The wildebeest and other herds moved farther away, leaving the wolves to face a harsh winter. The once abundant savannah now seemed unforgiving. Hunger gnawed at the pack's belly, and fear began to settle in. Mosi knew that they couldn't afford to wait for the prey to return. They needed to act, to find new sources of food. The pack ventured into areas they had never explored before. High cliffs, dense forests, and the rocky outcrops where the big cats usually roamed. Every day was a new struggle, and every step forward felt uncertain. Yet Mosi never wavered. One day, as they traversed the harsh, barren lands, Mosi spotted a new opportunity, an old elephant carcass, picked over by scavengers, but still holding valuable scraps of meat. It wasn't the ideal prey, but it was food, and in the dry season, that was enough. The pack gathered around the carcass, each member weary but hopeful. Mosi's eyes scanned the horizon, ever watchful. Just as they began to feast, a sudden growl echoed through the air. A pride of lions, led by a fierce lioness, appeared from behind the thickets, attracted by the scent of the carcass. Tension rippled through the pack. The lions were strong, fast, and dangerous. Mosi knew that if the wolves fought, the risk of injury or death was high, and their chances of survival would diminish drastically. Instead of charging into battle, Mosi's mind raced. He could not afford to lose any members of his pack. With a signal, he led them into the surrounding thickets, using the terrain to separate the lions from the wolves. The pride chased after them, but the wolves' quickness and agility allowed them to evade the lions' powerful strikes. Mosi darted toward the lions, drawing their attention away from the pack and leading them into a narrow canyon. As the lions followed, the narrow path became their undoing. The wolves used their speed to outmaneuver the lions, forcing them into an area where the big cats could not turn or maneuver. The lions growled in frustration, but the wolves held their ground, keeping the lions at bay. It was a dangerous game, but Mosi's quick thinking had saved them once again. The pack, though exhausted, had survived another day. In the months that followed, the drought began to ease. The rains returned, the grasslands flourished, and the herds returned to the savannah. The wolves of Mosi's pack had endured, and under his leadership, they had thrived. They had learned the value of patience, strategy, and unity. As the pack settled in for the coming rainy season, Mosi stood at the edge of the plains once again. The stars twinkled above, and the sounds of the savannah whispered in his ears. He had led them through their darkest days, but he knew that the true measure of a leader wasn't in how they led their pack through easy times. It was how they guided them through the storms. Mosi had proved that he was not only the leader his father had hoped for, but the leader his pack had needed. He had understood that strength alone could never sustain them, but the wisdom of knowing when to fight and when to wait would carry them through whatever challenges lay ahead. And so, the legend of Mosi the African wolf continued to grow, a tale of intelligence, patience, and the unbreakable bond between a leader and his pack. The wolves, knowing that survival wasn't just about strength, but about understanding the world around them, had learned to live in harmony with the land, as Mosi had always believed. As the rains washed over the Serengeti once more, life began to return to the land. The savannah transformed into a vibrant tapestry of green, and the herds of wildebeest and antelope flooded back into the plains. But Mosi knew that the balance of nature could be fragile. Just as the rains had returned, so too could the dry seasons. He knew that his leadership would not only be tested by the strength of his pack, but also by the unpredictable forces of nature. Mosi had always understood the importance of adaptability. It wasn't enough to survive once. Survival required constant vigilance, a willingness to evolve with each new challenge. As his pack grew stronger and more skilled under his guidance, Mosi began to consider what the future held for them. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Mosi gathered his pack once more. The air was heavy with the scent of fresh rain, and the pack members, now leaner and stronger from their trials, sat in a loose circle around him. He could feel the weight of their trust, the burden of their expectations, but he stood tall, confident in his vision for the future. "We've learned much in the past seasons," Mosi began, his voice carrying across the stillness of the evening. "We've survived droughts, lions, and the harshest of hunts. But the greatest challenge we now face is not one of survival, it's one of growth." The pack remained silent, their eyes fixed on their leader, waiting for the direction that would shape their future. "I've seen the way the world changes," Mosi continued, "how the land shifts beneath our paws. There are new places to explore, new opportunities to find. We've always been hunters, but we can be more than that. We can be guardians of this land, keepers of the balance. But to do so, we must grow, and we must adapt." The idea of becoming more than just hunters intrigued the pack. Mosi's vision was bold, one that would require them to venture beyond their territory and forge new relationships with the other creatures of the savannah. But it would also demand more from each wolf, a greater sense of responsibility and a willingness to face new dangers. As Mosi spoke, he could see the pack members looking to one another, sensing the challenge ahead. Some were eager, ready for change, while others hesitated, unsure of the path their leader was suggesting. It would not be easy, but Mosi believed it was the only way to secure their future. The next morning, after the pack had rested, Mosi led them into unfamiliar territory. They traveled further from their usual hunting grounds, exploring regions where lions and hyenas were more common, where the herds were denser, but so were the threats. The land was more rugged, more unpredictable, but with each step, Mosi could feel the pack growing stronger, becoming more unified under his leadership. As they crossed a river one morning, Mosi noticed something unusual: a large, lone hyena standing on the opposite bank, staring intently at the wolves. Hyenas were known to be opportunistic scavengers, often preying on weaker animals, but this one didn't seem to be hungry. Instead, it was watching them with a strange, almost calculating gaze. Mosi immediately called for the pack to halt, his instincts telling him that this was no ordinary hyena. It wasn't long before other hyenas began to appear from the shadows of the trees, surrounding the wolves from all sides. They were outnumbered, but Mosi remained calm, his eyes scanning the terrain for an escape. He knew that this was another test, not of strength, but of leadership. The hyenas, sensing that they had the advantage, began to circle closer. Mosi turned to his pack, speaking softly but with authority. "Stay close and stay sharp. We fight with our minds, not our claws." The hyenas moved in, their eyes gleaming with hunger and mischief. But Mosi had prepared them for moments like this. With a swift motion, he led the pack in a retreat, using the terrain to their advantage. They darted between the thick trees, slipping through narrow paths, all the while keeping the hyenas guessing. The pack moved as one, a coordinated unit, driven by Mosi's leadership. At one point, Mosi broke away from the group, drawing the hyenas' attention. He led them into a small ravine, where the narrow walls would prevent the hyenas from easily surrounding him. As the hyenas approached, Mosi swiftly scaled the sides of the ravine, finding higher ground. His pack followed suit, and soon they had a commanding view of the surrounding area. The hyenas, realizing they had been outsmarted, hesitated. They knew that a fight would be costly, and the wolves were no longer an easy target. With a low growl, the leader of the hyenas signaled for the group to retreat. One by one, they vanished into the shadows. Mosi breathed a sigh of relief, but knew that their escape had come at a cost. While they had avoided a battle, the pack had learned an invaluable lesson. Leadership was about knowing when to fight and when to outmaneuver the enemy. It wasn't about brute strength. It was about adaptability, intelligence, and trust in one another. In the days that followed, Mosi's pack encountered more challenges. They faced lions and wild dogs, and on one occasion, they even had to protect a young zebra from a pride of lions. Each encounter was different, but with each victory and loss, Mosi's leadership was solidified. The wolves of the Serengeti came to see Mosi not only as a leader, but as a protector of balance. Under his guidance, they grew into a force that was both feared and respected. They weren't just hunters. They were defenders of the land, guardians of the creatures that roamed it, ensuring that the circle of life continued as it should. As Mosi grew older, he reflected on the path that had brought him here. He had learned from his father Kazi, but he had also forged his own way, carving out a legacy built on wisdom, strategy, and the willingness to adapt. His father had taught him the importance of strength, but Mosi had taught his pack the power of unity and intelligence. On his final day, as the sun set over the Serengeti, Mosi stood alone at the edge of the plains, looking out over the land he had fought so hard to protect. The wind ruffled his dark coat, and the distant calls of his pack echoed in the distance. Mosi knew that his time was coming to an end, but he was at peace. He had led his pack through the harshest of times, and now they were strong, resilient, and prepared for whatever lay ahead. The legacy of Mosi, the African wolf, would live on in the hearts of his pack and in the stories told for generations to come. He had taught them that true leadership was not about domination, but about understanding the land, the animals, and each other. Mosi had guided them through the savannah's most brutal trials, and now they were ready to thrive, no matter what the future brought. And so, as the stars appeared overhead, Mosi's story came to an end. But the tale of his wisdom and courage would echo through the Serengeti for as long as the wolves still roamed its vast plains.